You might have noticed the pictures of motorcycles behind me. I have about 30 years of riding experience on a lot of different motorcycles. My wife would say on too many different motorcycles. Motorcycle suspension has changed a lot over the last 100 years. The first motorcycles had little, if anything, in the way of suspension. Then came Springer and girder front ends with rigid hardtail frames. A couple of springs under the seat helped the rider cushion the ride for him, but it wasn't a whole lot. Eventually we got swing arms with dual shocks and glide tube front ends. Today motorcycles have inverted forks, single rear shocks, and other semi-exotic systems like the paralever and telelever suspension on the late model BMWs. I had a couple of those. All the different configuration and suspension were designed to allow the rider to maintain control of the vehicle and enjoy a bit of comfort. In order to provide that control, the shock absorber must cushion the impact of bumps and dips in the road, but it must also cushion the return of the shock to its original position. Otherwise, that's very jarring too. And this is called rebound dampening. When the suspension doesn't work correctly, bad things happen. Now, my brother Doug had this custom Triumph with long extended fork tubes, but it wasn't handling right. It had the extended fork tubes and chrome sliders. It looked really good. Doug added a fork brace between the tubes to try to get the handling under control. Now, one day he got a flat tire. When you tie a motorcycle down, most people would tend to compress the springs in the front fork so that it keeps the ropes tight on the bike and it keeps the bike from falling over in the truck or the trailer. While we were tying the Triumph down in the back of a truck, we discovered that the front end could not be compressed at all. One of the sliders, the lower part that holds the wheel, was bent, and it prevented any movement in the front suspension. So this was the source of all the handling issues. Every bump was being transferred into the frame and the handlebars of that motorcycle. And things could have gone really wrong. The front wheel of a motorcycle is constantly making minute adjustments to the direction of travel. You take a poorly designed suspension system, add speed and a sudden impact, and the front end could start oscillating wildly from one fork stop to the other. You get the handlebars going like this. And this situation is known as a tank slapper. Without proper clearance, the handlebars could literally be slapping the sides of the fuel tank as it swings rapidly back and forth. And it takes an experienced rider to get out of this without crashing a bike. Now, Christians are called upon to be shock absorbers for God. This is not an easy job. When the Israelites moved into the Promised Land, they set up what were called cities of refuge. It worked like this. If a man accidentally killed another person, he could flee to one of these cities and present his case to the elders there. If they judged it to be an accident, the man would be given sanctuary in the city, but he must remain there until the chief priest died. Otherwise, the relatives of the deceased would seek to kill the man as revenge for the death. Then that man's relatives would seek revenge upon those people. And the city of the refuge was designed to prevent an escalating blood feud. Now, like the cities of refuge, God has given us the task of trying to diffuse situations before they get out of hand. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 tells us, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." How we handle a hurt or offense determines whether it ends up here or keeps on going. If it gets into that oscillation, it will keep getting worse because it builds as it goes back and forth. Paul put it another way. He writes in Romans, "Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men." Now, that's not the typical response. Most of us want to act on Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. We don't want to be shock absorbers. We want to be shock and awe. This attitude doesn't accomplish much. One reason we need to diffuse situations is because we can't win over someone with whom we are arguing. In order to break the cycle, we may have to give up our rights. Oh boy, read the news. We are a nation obsessed with our rights. We have people marching in the streets demanding rights to which they are not entitled. Others are creating rights where none exist. Do I wear a mask? Do I don't wear a mask? Everyone is focused on their rights. However, Jesus teaches us, you have heard that it is said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. We cannot put an end to the arguments, the hostility, and the pain unless we die to ourselves. Forgiveness is giving up my right to hurt you for hurting me. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not natural. Who would really want to do that? Well, there was one person who gave up everything, including his life in a horrible death, so that he could end the hostility between man and God. And he said, be like me.